Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mechanics of StarCraft, and I am MVP Dongcroft of the BattleNet forums, and I am here with Ponera.
Hello.
Our biology and paleontology expert, the very famous EG.iNcontroL.
Hey, hi.
The pro gamer and spokesperson from Team EG, Evil Geniuses, and Zappy, our local expert in physics and chemistry.
That's very fancy sounding, thank you.
And I'll be your lore master as far as StarCraft goes.
Yeah.
Take.
So the topic today is the dragoon / Immortal, which is kind of interesting because it does have that sort of intricate biology as well as the whole mechanics going on. So I guess since it's a mechanics episode, I'll let Zappy start things off.
Well, I mean, what do we want to talk about first? We've got to hit up the weapons and the shields from my end, so.
Okay, well, here's what I want to know. How would a hardened shield even work?
Alright, well, it appears to be a form of reactive armor. For those who aren't too familiar with that, we see it a lot on tanks these days. They're used to repel things like RPGs and whatnot, and what it is it's a shape charge that's pointed away, mounted on the hull of the tank and pointed away from the tank. Obviously, you don't want to point it at the tank. And whenever you get hit by something, it explodes back into the incoming projectile to kind of stop it from actually getting through the armor. And that is kind of what the hardened shields appear to be. If you notice when they get hit, it kind of puffs outwards a bit. Can't really think of a great way to explain that. But basically, I think that's what's going on, is the Immortal has some sort of a trigger where if it gets hit by something that does more than 10 damage, it flares its shields out to kind of break up the impact of whatever is hitting it.
Okay, so I see what you're saying, yeah.
Now, I have a bit on the weapons.
Okay.
The weapon is called a phase disruptor. Now, interestingly enough, the Dragoon and the Immortal actually have the same weapon, base weapon. It's a phase disruptor, except for when the Dragoon fires, it's an antimatter particle that's encased in some kind of psychically charged field, kind of like a photon cannon fires.
Oh, you know we don't like magic on this show.
This is right. This is straight from the StarCraft Compendium. Compendium. Okay. And when the Immortal fires, it's more of a direct burst. It's not really in a containment field, so it's much more unstable and volatile on impact.
Huh. Interesting. So the weapons, I guess they sort of changed. Well, I guess they obviously did change gears from from Brood War to Wings of Liberty. One thing that I wanted to comment on, which I think is rather funny, is maybe they updated the way that the mechanics work inside of it, because obviously the pathing is a lot better.
Well, I think it brings up an interesting question, though. Is there any other weapon that the Protoss have shown to use that's not like beam-based or of energy use? It seems like this is like the first kind of railgun-esque kind of weapon, right?
Yeah,
there was the anti-ground weapon on the old Scout, I recall, but
good call. Yeah, that seemed to have like a machine gun fire to it.
Yeah, it did. It was one of the few things where you couldn't actually see the projectile. It just flashed like a puzzle. Yeah.
Huh. There's like 4 people that made a Scout in the history of Brood War, and you were able to bring that back up to memory. That's amazing.
I remember in like random team games, I would sometimes go like all Scouts just to counter their battlecruiser rushes, but
yeah.
Yeah.
It was like 100 resources shy from a carrier and close in supply, and then it did 9 damage to ground or 8 or something like that. So it was
7,
a pretty funny thing to see. Yeah, 7. There you go.
It was 250, 150. It did 7 damage versus ground. Had 150 health and 100 shields. It was basically like a Void Ray, except totally different. Same stats though.
Yeah. Wow. Huh. No wonder noobs like Void Rays. You don't understand the carriers are OP, man. So anyway, I wanted to talk about, I wanted to ask EG.iNcontroL, is there anything that you observed from the Dragoon, to the Immortal, either sort of thing that kind of bugs you or that you'd honestly wonder about?
For me, I don't know. I don't actually quite understand the lore, so I'm kind of excited to hear about it, but I liked the idea behind a Dragoon as like when a warrior falls, this is like the RoboCop that comes back, and it's a support unit that does, it has the utility of a stalker, but it had kind of that oomph that was more closer to an Immortal in StarCraft 2, but in both senses, it feels like the two of them, they couldn't coexist because they're confused roles. Like the Immortal packs a lot more punch, but only hits ground and is more expensive. The Dragoon is obviously like a stronger stalker minus the blink, so its utility as far as that kind of micro is a little bit of a wash. So to me, you actually almost have to rope in the stalker and then talk about all three of those units being like a weird dissection of a concept spread out between three units, which I think is kind of weird to me.
The key difference between the Stalker Immortals and the Immortal and the Dragoon versus the Stalker is that, as you mentioned, they do take like an injured warrior and shove them in there. Whereas I think with a Stalker, the lore talks about like infusing souls or some other weird
It's the
magic.
shadow essence. When they blink, you remember Zeratul blinks in the cinematics in Wings of Liberty. They have the ability to infuse themselves into a crystal, kind of like they do with the Warp Prism when they're picked up. They get turned into like an energy. That's kind of, but the Dark Templar do it a little differently. It's their shadow essence. It's not really well explained. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
But
it's not even present in the lore as far as I'm concerned. You know what I mean? Like, that seems like something insane that you would want to talk about, but they're just like, yeah, they blink and there's this like shadow essence and they're kind of there, but they're kind of not.
It's kind of like the lore for the creep, how it, quote, somehow sustains the Zerg. Thanks.
Yeah.
And I've had to try to grapple with that. I get a lot of people emailing me with ideas and stuff like that, which is a good time to remind people to keep doing that because I don't obviously think of everything.
I feel like that one could be the thing that's funny. I like that Blizzard's doing these lower Q&As, by the way. They're like starting to give this more attention, but since they borrowed so much from Tyranids with Zerg, it seems fairly easily explainable that they just kind of cover whatever land they occupy with that creep, and that's part of their assimilation process. Because you'll remember, they also borrow the lore where like the Hydralisk, the Zergling, those things come from like indigenous creatures of other planets that they then bring into the swarm. So it seems to fit that lore, but if they do no legwork for it, we're all just a bunch of nerds sitting around coming up with good ideas.
Well, the whole point of what we do here is, I mean, obviously since I've got a background in comparative anatomy and stuff, I can actually say with a little bit of authority what's going on, but you're right. It's kind of a little bit of arm waving, but it's a lot of fun.
Speaking of anatomy, I think it's a good time we bring up that picture, that excellent concept art of Phoenix, who's the most famous Dragoon. I mean, EG.iNcontroL know all about Phoenix. I mean, Phoenix was like one of every kid's childhood heroes who played StarCraft. It's like,
he's the Praetor trainer, man. He was a badass.
Yeah.
Yes, he was. And there's a picture of him. Too. And man, I didn't know it as a kid, but looking at this just today, I realized like, holy cow, this guy's been torn up. He's got severe injuries. Like he's missing his right arm, most of it, and both his legs, and his lower abdomen is just torn to shreds.
Yeah.
But he's got like his left arm is still intact and it's like over his chest, like he's still pledged to ire. It's really dramatic and awesome.
Yeah,
we'll have to be.
we'll make sure the picture ends up in the video that Vendetta ends up doing. I'd like to point out that, you'd have to have a specific set of injuries in order to qualify to be a Dragoon. Obviously, if you're shot in the face with a Gauss rifle, that's not really going to go over so well with being put into a Dragoon. So you need to have your sort of brain and head capable of functioning. And I think by and large, transplants notwithstanding, I don't know how advanced their medical technology is, but by and large, you need to have your organ systems functioning too. Without that, you're not going to get a whole lot of use out of putting somebody into a Dragoon, I think. So I think that almost explains why there was limited amounts of Dragoons made. And I guess the technology was lost when Ire fell, so now there's even fewer Immortals.
But you think about this. When it came to Dragoons, I'm sorry. When it came to Dragoons, the more Protoss that got injured. See, when a Zealot gets severely, when his HP's going down, he gets teleported back to his, wherever.
Yeah, exactly.
And it depends. Sometimes they're not so severely injured and they can return to battle as Zealots. Sometimes they die. And sometimes they are crippled or mortally wounded but they want to continue their service as warriors, so they are placed in a Dragoon exoskeleton.
Yeah.
I was going to ask that has to be something we have to speculate or at least talk about too, because I wonder at what point in time they teleport back. Is it in a mangled state, or is it, is there any word on that, or what you guys think about, like, Because it seems like that seems fairly. I don't know, if I had a little dial on my wrist, like, how mangled do I want to be before I pull out a battle? I'm going to go with, I'm missing like a hand maybe, but probably a little bit shy of that too, you know what I mean?
Ponera's not going to like this, but it has to do with the Kala.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Kala, which is their connection with each other. This is one reason why Dark Templar don't do this. They don't get like warped out about it. It's the Kala. Their collective consciousness somehow lets them, because remember, their psychics, their psionics, and their technology are intertwined. They're like one and the same. They bind them together. Their shields are psionic, etc. So when they get to a certain point, there's some kind of signal that goes out, and their armor activates an emergency teleport. But it's dangerous, and it often doesn't help much, but it gets them out.
Huh. So basically, when at that point, I want to sort of pick up a little bit of the biology here and point some things out. Basically, the internal workings, like once you've got this mangled body with little biddies hanging off of it and all that, if they meet the criteria and they volunteer, they're going to be shoved inside of this dragoon, and presumably their nervous system will be integrated because it's not like they're like you pointed out to me earlier, Doncroft. It's not like they're driving the dragoon; they are the dragoon. So they really get integrated. And I think if you look at the unit portrait, where there's like, that little fish swimming around in there and whatnot.
Yep.
Effectively what that could be is like a dissolved gas-rich slurry. So they presumably respire as organisms. So whether they're, photosynthetic and using carbon dioxide, or let's just say for argument's sake that they're breathing in oxygen. Makes it nice and simple for us to talk about. They're gonna dissolve a lot of this oxygen into this slurry, this liquid, and probably put in a lot of things like amino acids and other things that can help with not only the open wounds, because it looks from that one picture like he was kind of hurriedly shoved in there. Didn't look like they did a whole lot in sealing up a lot of these wounds, right?
Right.
And from there, obviously they're going to do things like poop and do, their normal Protossy things. So that's where that little goldfish thing actually comes in. If you've ever seen hippos at the zoo, and I'm not even kidding you, they have these apple-sized poops, and these fish that are in there actually eat a large amount of this material and break it down so that it can later be filtered. It's always kind of amusing when you see like an apple floating in amongst the hippo poop, and you think, well, the hippo's got a really large gaping mouth. What happens if he goes to eat that apple, It's gonna be a bad time. So
Don't go through your head.
Yeah, we just justified the little goldfish Easter egg thing. What?
Yeah, that's
Kirby.
right.
I didn't know there was a freaking goldfish in there, man.
There is. Router named Kirby.
Yeah, and so basically they have this fish in there that's helping to clean up this waste. And from there, if you've ever seen, I don't know if you guys know a whole lot about saltwater fish tanks, but they've kind of moved in later.
Oh, I'm an expert.
Nice. All right.
No.
Basically now the trend is that a lot of people aren't using actual filter systems like you see with freshwater fish tanks. What they do is they chuck live coral in there, and the coral actually eats what's left of the materials. So all you have to do is manage the salt and other chemical levels in the tank. And that's probably something that we're seeing here, is that it's not only being maintained by this fish that's taking out the large chunkies, but there's probably things like radiolarians or dinoflagellates or diatoms, these microscopic organisms that are, and there's presumably some internal light source, so that if Protoss are photosynthetic, I'm not sure if we ever decided whether or not they were photo or chemosynthetic. But anyway,
I thought I remember hearing they're photosynthetic. I thought that was in the lore for Brood War.
That is correct. That was stated.
Okay, so they would need to have a light source, right? I guess since they're photosynthetic, that means they use carbon dioxide, but that's okay because the fish would actually be producing carbon dioxide as well and using the oxygen that is produced by, say, Phoenix. And it works quite nicely. You can have like a little mini ecosystem without even the need for filtration, depending on the types of organisms you put into this slurry.
On the record, Herbie is as much canon as the Terratron is.
Yeah.
Nope, it's a fish. Nope, it's a fish.
He's making it work, though. I appreciate that. You're doing a lot of...
He does that.
It's apparently too difficult to just have a filter.
Right,
So we have to have an entire ecosystem contained within the
Well,
Immortal
hold on now. If you can create a walking, mechanized body for someone, but a filter? Now that's just technology that doesn't exist yet. Come on now.
Nope.
Well, I mean, to be fair, with Blizzard, sometimes the technology doesn't exist.
Doesn't actually exist.
The SCV can repair, Protoss mechanical stuff, but the probe can't. It's just same reason.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think it's actually simpler to have this ecosystem because if you have an advanced sort of filter system, you're going to need things like charcoal to remove a lot of the, basically the urine, right? The ammonia and things like that. You're going to replace filter cartridges and things like that. So it's actually, and it actually takes away from the overall power source, right?
I think we should start talking about the transition from the Dragoon to the Immortal itself, because there's interesting changes in the models. I don't know if Zappy has noticed any of these.
The model just kind of looks like they took the Dragoon model, updated the graphics for StarCraft 2, and then slapped 2 giant cannons on top of it.
Its head's very different. Its head's very different. Like the Dragoon model, it has kind of a weird, 4 legs attached by, almost a comical head bottle thing for its head. And then the Immortal actually has, a standalone pyramid-shaped, actual head.
And that's what I'm saying.
Exactly.
If you
also, the legs on the Dragoon were different lengths. There were 2 long legs and 2 short legs. And there was a spinning, 4-pronged strut on the bottom that would extend when it shoots to, anchor it when it was firing. That's not on the Immortal. That's been removed.
Yeah, the Immortals, if you see it fire, its arms actually have the servos necessary to absorb the shock. Mm-hmm. It's not actually in the leg system. It's up in the upper body, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, you're correct.
So it looks to me like there's overall more room for the occupant of the Immortal as well.
A comfortable ride, if you'd say. Right?
Yeah, they probably put in some subwoofers and,
Doesn't matter, these guys are the veterans among the veterans. These are the guys that got injured, got put into Dragoons, and guess what? The Dragoons can't be made anymore because of Ire getting infested, and guess what? They're still at it.
Yeah. They've got things like, hydraulics. They've got a really pimped out ride, if they were in any...
Extremely.
Yeah, if they were in a slum, they'd be the kings, right? So.
Well, they've got 2 giant phase cannons in case there's ever traffic. I mean.
And a hard shield, yeah.
Yeah, one thing that's bugged me about the Immortal transition, and they say, they can't make them anymore. Are the Protoss not smart enough to, retrofit this stuff? Or, what is it about this transition that has made it so that they can't make any more? I don't get that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with it.
Yeah, did they do any legwork on that at all? Did they explain that?
No.
It has. This isn't well explained, I'll admit it, but it has to do with the Protoss constantly combining their technology. It wasn't a factory; it was a darn shrine. That's what they said. It was an actual shrine, so it was like a holy process, believe it or not. So it's something that we Terrans we don't get it because we don't do stuff like that. Well, we don't have factories that are also churches. Well, not that I know.
Well, maybe in some parts of the world, mechanically.
Yeah, maybe in
Whoa, 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 whoa.
Detroit.
Yeah. Oh.
Ow! I'm from Michigan. Dang.
Nice.
Same here, actually.
Gotta be known for something.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I want to know is, okay, so they've got the technology to take the Dragoon and then make all the legs the same length and change basically the whole body of it. So it's got to be something on the biology end where they're either keeping something alive or integrating the nervous system somehow. And I'm finding it really difficult to reconcile the fact that these guys apparently aren't smart enough. They're smart enough to do things like teleport across the galaxy and use gravity wells to warp guys in and make these they're like a vast civilization, but they're not smart enough to go, oh, that's how we do it. We just slap them inside this mechanical thing and...
Keep in mind, these are the guys who, instead of fighting the Zerg, wasted time arresting Tazadar and the Dark Templar, who were their only hope of fighting the Zerg.
That's true. Yeah.
Very political, very prolific.
Yeah, you have to integrate their religion into everything that they do because they're kind of crazy. I mean, my guess is they probably still could make Dragoons, but they're like, no, the Dragoon place is gone. We're going to update the Dragoon design and call it the Immortal and build that instead.
Well, they can't build it though. They don't build them. They just retrofit Dragoons. That's the whole process that they go through. They don't. They actually specific. Yeah. So I find that rather frustrating. Why
don't they make new Immortals? Just take new injured. I mean, where do the injured zealots go now?
They just die, presumably.
Yeah.
What I find a little bit frustrating as well is they've got the technology to make a stalker, which has similar, legs and stuff like that. And what they do is they infuse the soul of a Dark Templar or whatever magic witchcraft they use. Why can't they just do that with an immortal body?
Actually, you know what? I'm looking at the wiki page right now, and it says, following Brood War, Crippled Templar were transported into new immortal exoskeletons instead, implying that they, you know, were in fact making these new immortal exoskeletons to put these newly crippled Templar into.
Right. They just took the central chassis out of it, and just there's very little actually carrying over.
Huh. So you just basically made me look like an asshole.
Yeah, kind of.
That'll happen, you know.
That hard.
Yeah, it's not that hard. I'm a little bit known for trolling, so.
Alright, well, I should probably, at least at some point during this, talk about the weapons.
Yes, please do.
So, I'm actually going to start with the Immortal. And just to briefly explain, the Dragoon it's kind of backwards, but it's actually kind of a hybrid of the Stalkers and the Immortals' weapons, where at some point they realized, okay, if we separate these things into two different parts, it will be more effective in each particular role. At least that's what I would assume that they assumed.
No, I concur. That's a very good assessment.
So the Immortal, it's called a phase disruptor, and it does a massive bonus to armored. So I'm not exactly sure at what level this works at, whether it's, you know, something really relatively macroscopic like molecular level, or it goes down to quarks or something. I'm not 100% on that. So if you guys have ideas, let me know. But basically, I believe the idea is that they fire some sort of an electromagnetic wave that would resonate between whatever particles that they're trying to separate, breaking the bonds between them by forcing them apart. At which point, you know, they break the bonds by putting in this amount of energy, and then they form new bonds. For those of you who've taken like chemical thermodynamics, you probably
then
know.
you know I have. Yeah, we've all done that. Yeah.
All two of
One of
you
my
out there.
favorite classes I take at nighttime, yeah.
I'm sure. But I mean, basically in chemistry, you know, you have chemical reactions where you break bonds between atoms, and then they form new bonds, and you put energy in to break the bonds, and then when the new bonds form, energy comes out. So it's kind of the same idea, but presumably it's not at the atomic level. It's something smaller. And with the Dragoon, it's exactly that, where it shoots out, it breaks it apart, and then when it comes back together, it releases energy that's doing damage. And then with the bonus to armored, essentially what I would assume that is not only is armor going to be a more dense material, so you would have more of it's essentially X-rays, the Immortals shooting. I mean, the thing's a giant X-ray machine, more or less.
So the counter to that is just a lead vest.
Correct, yeah. But when you have
It's
these
Marines.
more dense,
The counter is Marines.
Oh, right, yes.
Well,
yeah, actually, I
that's kind
bet
of
the
easy answer.
cancer rate among Marines who get shot by this is really high. But anyway, with the more dense materials, not only would you have more molecules, atoms, whatever, available to be hit by these cannons, there would be more particles in the way to intercept the shots. And that might suffice to explain the Stalker, but I would imagine you would also hit this critical mass where you can have a chain reaction going, because the molecules and atoms are in such close proximity. The energy released from one impact site would be enough to separate the molecule, or separate the atoms, quarks, whatever it is they're separating, on the adjacent particle. And
Ouch.
it would be able to kind of chain out from there. Now, obviously, it's not going to entirely annihilate whatever it's hitting, so it probably releases just under the amount of energy that you need to actually separate everything, and so that you have a little bit of extra energy floating around from the initial blast to kind of push it over the edge. That's why it doesn't completely tear the thing apart.
Right, which explains why it doesn't completely disintegrate. Now, there's an old cinematic in Brood War called The Ambush. It's after Protoss Mission 5. And you basically, an injured Dragoon gets blown up by this stupid hippie siege tank thing. It's just so weird. Looks like a garbage truck with a artillery cannon on top. It's really weird. And then all these Dragoons decloak because they were under an arbiter, and they annihilate this little Dominion base. And a Terran without any armor on, just standard like uniform, gets hit by one of these phase disruptors, and he gets like disintegrated. He fire, there's a skeleton, and then he just turns to dust. But if you're encased in armor, obviously that's not going to happen by your explanation, Zappy, which makes sense.
Correct.
Otherwise I was confused by the death animations.
Yeah, the armor would just literally be a bullet shield and stop most of the particles from hitting you. So
Okay, so speaking of those cannons, have you ever seen in the idling Immortal animation how they actually can point the cannons
Yeah.
upwards?
Immortals are the biggest trolls known to Protoss kind.
Yeah, like why can't they just like rotate it up and then shoot it at a battlecruiser? Like I don't get that.
I can tell you. You see, that all comes with the what is it called? The psionic.
For God's sakes.
The psionic casing that the dragoons had and the photon cannons have when they shoot their particle. That's what gives it its accuracy at long range. So, I mean, in-game range and lore range are two totally different things. Basically, the Immortal shots would scatter too far without the casing to hit air units.
It
wouldn't be effective.
What I was going to say.
It points up to shoot up high ground.
Yeah, well, with the Immortals shot, I was going to say that, you remember earlier I was talking about the chain reactions and how it needs a little bit of input from the initial shot. It's likely that the initial shot after it hits something doesn't propagate very, very far from the, impact site, just because, high frequency waves are bad at doing that. So you'd probably end up with a similar situation where if it shot through that much atmosphere at a flying target, it would scatter the beam enough that it wouldn't be too effective anymore.
So, in Control, if Immortals could shoot air, what would you do?
See no other reason to make anything else. I mean, I think the Immortal would be...
It would be pretty good.
Pretty good unit, yeah.
Boards, for sure. You can make Immortals all game long in PvZ.
4 base, 4 or 5 robo, chrono boost, just...
See, here's another question. Why don't they just strap a few Immortals onto a carrier and, like, let them fly around with the Immortals on top and blast away the battle cruisers and things like that using the Immortals?
Probably not calibrated to shoot in the air, I would assume, right?
Well, the same reason the carrier doesn't annihilate the entire battlefield with its planet cracker beam, like it did in the first cinematic.
Yeah, that's stupid balance. So I'm hearing a lot of this like psionic magic garbage going on in this, and I gotta say, I find that stuff so frustrating because it's one of those things where, unless you can pin it down, anything can really be anything. You can say, oh, well, you could write anything off that you see as, oh, well, it's just psionics.
You're beginning to understand.
Mentioning it completely.
Yeah. Well, it's good for the show because anytime you guys are like, wow, we don't really have an explanation for that, we can just be like, the religion. Kala, yeah.
We'll be like ancient aliens, right?
They make a shrine. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. We're officially renaming it the Ancient Aliens now. That's the name of the show. And anytime that we're wondering, it's just because they're aliens,
Yep.
We can't possibly understand.
Yeah, I bet.
No need for future episodes, I suppose, because we've answered it all right here. Wow.
Season premiere.
Yeah, exactly.
Every episode ever. We just figured it out.
So I'm kind of wondering, like, I'm looking at the unit portrait for the Immortal, the one that's I guess the wire or something going right into his chest.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what that's all.
Well, let's see. Could it be something to do with the carbon dioxide or anything that would normally go out through the skin, or maybe some kind of life support system, because they are pretty badly banged up. Well, and I need to point this out. Every Dragoon/Immortal is different. Like the cybernetics that were on the old Dragoon, like if you looked at his unit portrait, he had like a cybernetic implant in his eye and like something on the side of his head, almost like a Borg.
Huh.
And this guy doesn't have that. He has a different set of injuries. So every Immortal is unique in what injuries they sustained and what they have to do to stay alive inside that.
So in other words, in the Protoss army, they're the ones that are getting bullied for being unique. Kind of like in high school, it's like, oh, you like.
Okay, you're in the Veterans Hospital, but instead of going out in a wheelchair, you go out in a giant Protoss tank killer.
That's pretty fair.
That's what it is.
I think I can answer this question. I mean, I know Panera's the biologist here, but with the random cord attached to their chest, it's we talked about how the Protoss are likely photosynthetic. But obviously they can't get light from inside the Immortal suit, and we see these kind of weird patterns etched into the front of the Immortal. I'm not really sure what it is, but is it possible that could be some sort of solar cell?
Yeah, I think that they have to, well, it would make more sense just to stick a UV bulb in there. I mean, I have one on my tortoise cage. It's like super easy, right? Instead of having this like elaborate like window treatment that lets
I mean, hey, you just explained an entire ecosystem to fit into this guy instead of fitting it with a filter. I mean, I think
You've not
it's too
enough UV
complicated.
radiation.
Well, I think what this is might be the, as far as this cord is, either some sort of integration to something like, a large nerve cluster, something like a ganglion that they would have where they can sort of communicate with the machine and that allows them to move around. Or it might be the way that they're getting some of the nutrients that they actually need in order to photosynthesize, just being directly injected. I don't think that it has anything to do with light, because obviously the photosynthesis would come through the skin, and that's a remarkably small surface area to be blasting with light.
I just realized that it's the
fair
Zerg's own fault that the Immortal Sentry All-In is happening.
Yep.
Because if they hadn't infested Ire, we wouldn't have the Immortals for the Immortal Sentry All-In.
Also, if they stopped killing Zealots and Templar, there'd be no one to put into these Immortal suits.
That's right. It's all your fault, Zerg players.
Oh, let's blame
your fault.
Can we blame Terrans more? I don't like Terran, so.
They didn't infest Ire, did they?
No, they didn't. They just,
Not yet.
all they do is just dominate the GSL for over a year.
Ah.
It's okay. So, what about the legs? I want to talk about that a little bit and how they move just before we, I guess, end the episode.
3 joints.
What's the point in making them the same length versus 2 different lengths from the Dragoon?
Probably to stabilize how heavy the chassis is on top.
Yeah,
I imagine.
The Dragoon, and this goes in complete contradiction to what we see in game, was actually probably more maneuverable. Yeah.
It was faster, we'll give it that.
And just because it's got a lot less weight on it, I mean, it's almost entirely legs. So, I mean, it was probably very maneuverable. You could get it over a lot of rough terrain, stuff like that. Whereas the Immortal's got this, giant head thing on it, so it probably has a more difficult time getting over rocks and whatnot. But as a trade-off, it has 2 giant badass cannons.
See, all the more reason for us to be strapping them onto carriers. Because they're not as mobile as their Brood War counterparts.
Would that balance the carriers out, you think?
Oh, definitely. They did it in Warcraft, did they not have, hippogriffs or whatever? And then they had archers able to jump on?
Yes.
Yeah, so we could just do a similar
elves.
thing. So, yeah, we're gonna actually, you know what, after this, I'm gonna have to have another episode on psionics, because that actually pisses me off. all of their religion and garbage being in there. No. We only like science in this group.
Well, I mean, I think it's valid to use their religion in some instances, like, why they wouldn't build the Dragoon anymore. It's just because they don't want to, but it is a bit silly that we have to rely on that.
Yeah, I think there's a practical reason why you need Immortals, and that's called the Roach. Without the Roach, you don't really need the Immortal. So I think,
it helps versus Blink Stalkers.
We have a pro player on. Let's ask him.
Yeah.
Yes.
The functionality of an Immortal?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think another big part getting away even from Zerg was just, Protoss had a lot of problems with tanks throughout the history of, a lot of the animations, it's tanks shooting something. And if you take out the Immortal, they're just kind of getting hit by tanks. So, and just absorbing full damage, I guess the point. So it feels like almost like their shield is a specific answer to a problem that they were having.
Yeah, Brood War, no ground unit could stand up against the siege tank toe to toe. Not really.
60 damage, right? Wasn't it 60?
It was actually, what was it? I want to say 70 damage versus large units.
That's what I was thinking too.
Wait,
Could be wrong.
Insane.
Weren't you a
And then
pro
it could
player
go
in
up to
Brood War?
85.
I was a Zerg player, yeah.
Okay, so do pro players not memorize every single number, or is that just...
No, that's just for us
For a
nerds.
game that I played 3 or 4 years ago,
fair enough,
no.
I
Tank
don't know.
does different damage to StarCraft 2.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that I'm sure have the numbers still memorized.
Me.
Obviously
I was
not,
thinking
because
they're
you're not
pretty good.
providing.
I talked about animations for stuff in Brood War. I'm pretty proud of the useless information I still am holding on to.
How about the Dragon Death animation?
Yeah, it just spills out its little blue juice and just kind of...
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
messy.
that gas-rich slurry. And the too bad there's, when you kill an immortal, there's no like little fish flopping around.
Well, you know what I was going to say too? It's funny about that. It's like, hey, we put you in a dragoon. You know, welcome back to the battle. And he's like, thanks. And he's like, I noticed my eye warp back wristwatch is gone. And they're like, yeah, that only works on zealots, you idiot. Like, is there any reason why you can't teleport back as a dragoon? Like, why is that your last chance? Like, maybe you leave the suit behind. Yeah, it doesn't exist. Okay.
Well, they might be teleporting the body back, but not the chassis. We don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
It could also be because anything that's going to kill a dragoon or an immortal has got enough firepower that there's no way you're going to make it out of it in any condition that would.
Yeah, they're already on their
warping
last
back.
legs.
Well, think about it like a tank in, we'll say World War II, for example. They were effectively death traps. Like, if somebody hit you with an RPG, or another tank shell hit you, yeah, don't ruin this for me. If you're hit by like a bomb, say, okay, some sort of explosive, there's only two ways out of the tank as far as I know. There's the emergency hatch on the bottom, then there's the thing on the top, the main door on the top. And like a lot of times people would die just because they couldn't get out in time. Yeah. And I think that might be similar. They weren't really made for the ability to escape. I think they were just made for the ability to be ultra badass.
Actually, this is a little bit random, but you ever notice that everything in StarCraft only has one pilot? I mean, we've got a tank with 4 people in it on average, and then they've got like everything from the Siege tank all the way up to the Thor, and there's only one guy in there.
Son of a gun.
Yeah, that's true.
Didn't they have? I'd be interested to see like a wiki on carriers, because I know there's some animations where they definitely show like Tassadar or whoever sitting in this gigantic frickin' chamber room, and it seems to be just him, but I could have sworn I read somewhere that it said like the occupancy was 115 or some garbage. But also battlecruisers have a full staff of people on them.
Okay, fair
enough. And they must have a Russian in command. Must.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, what else are they going to do in the future?
Okay, so I think we're kind of at time here. We've been going for about 40 minutes or so. So I want to thank you, EG.iNcontroL, for coming on the show, and
thanks for having me. It was really enjoyable.
And thank you to the usuals, the guys I take for granted, Zappy.
We'll have to do a White Raw impression next time.
Actually, White Raw would be awesome to have on the show.
My God.
And I think you know what?
For all the wrong reasons, though. You wouldn't understand a damn word you guys are saying. You realize that?
Well, we actually have.
We have to have a carrier episode at some point.
We'll need a translator.
Yeah, it's true. It'll be all right. Well, I'll just start mass
from English to regular English.
Exactly. So anyway, thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks.